Welcome to our Kiwanis meeting of the Spanish Fork Kiwanis Club. We're so glad to have everyone here tonight, and we're especially glad to have Channel 17. We're especially grateful also to the veterans of Spanish Fork for letting us use this wonderful facility. They've remodeled this room, and it's just a wonderful facility for us to use, and we're so happy that they're letting us use this facility, the Kiwanis Club, free of charge. And so if you know a veteran here in Spanish Fork, thank them for us. We also would like to thank the one-man band Diner for providing tonight's meal. It's awesome. Thank you so much. Tonight we have a very special guest, and I've got Raphael's going to come up here and introduce him, and we'll proceed like that. And then I'll come back up at the end.
We've asked Kris Poulson. He's graciously accepted to come here tonight and speak with us. Kris Poulson is the Utah County Assessor. He's now into his fourth term. He's a wonderful man. He has an open door policy there at Utah County. He's willing to talk with you related to assessments. And tonight he'll talk to us about growth and new growth and other things regarding that here in Utah County. So without further ado, I'll turn the time over to Kris Poulson.
Well, I appreciate the offer to come over. Growing up, I actually played Little League on the Kiwanis Little League baseball team. We played at the Rotary Field, so I was kind of conflicted about that whole situation. But I do want to tell you this one joke, though. We were out to dinner. This is years ago. And I had my two daughters with me, and my brother was with me too, and he used to work for Jimmy Osmond. So Donnie happened to come into the restaurant we were at. He came over and we were giving the kids a bad time, just having fun. When they left, when Donnie walked off, my youngest daughter said, "Who's that?" I said, that was Donnie Osmond. Who's Donnie Osmond? And before I could say anything, the 16-year-old in all her wisdom looked at the 13-year-old and said, "That's Marie's husband." So, a little bit of a generation gap there, huh? I was asked to talk about property values. As you know, the county is issuing a lot of building permits. There's a lot of growth going on right now. We're in a little different economy than a lot of other states. We're not a large economy like demographics such as Vegas or Phoenix or something like that. So we're attracting a lot of industry here. You can see what's going on in Lehigh. I would say 25% of the building permits we have in the county are in Lehigh. And it's just growing. You have people wanting to get out of the Salt Lake area. They're going into Saratoga Springs and the Lehigh area so they can still commute back and forth. But that's really had a big impact up there. I remember when I was in high school, Lehigh was a little 2A high school up there, and you can see the difference now with all the growth we've had up there. But not only has growth been dynamic here, but I wanted to give you a comparison of where we are now and how we got here and what's going on, comparing it to nationals. The national statistics, let me explain what this is. The red transitions into blue. The blue is the actuals at the national level. So this is the U.S. national level. This is home price sales. So the red was coming along. This purple color is Utah County. And when I came into office was in 2002, which is right in this area. Real estate that year in 2003, it only went up 4%. And as you can see, it was pretty much, there's kind of a trend line. That's what this purple going forward is we started in 1999 and went through to about 2007, right before the bubble hit. You see this trend line coming up through. Same is true at the national level. It was a little steeper trend line, But that's if everything stayed relatively constant. That's the values that we'd be seeing. Well, the bubble hit in other parts. I didn't expect the bubble to last that long in Utah because Vegas they'd already burst before we ever started. And so when it burst, you had investment money that came up into St. George. St. George in 2006 was considered the hottest market in America. And then it's traveled on up to, I guess it was 2004 when it was the hottest market. 2006 is when we started going up. And because Phoenix, Miami, Las Vegas, all these areas were going down in value, I didn't think it was going to last that long. So we kind of tried to keep the values lagging behind, hoping that it was going to burst it quickly on us and come back down, but it didn't. You can see this green spike, how it just accelerated right there. And that was in 1 year it went up, and it spiked up here right around the national average at that point. And then in 2008, that's when the mortgage derivatives hit the wall, and you had all of the federal government upset about what was going on with mortgage derivatives, and that's when everything started falling. Nationally, because a lot of the areas had already started falling before that, they bottomed out before we did. We kept falling down into the 2011 was pretty much where it bottomed out at in this county. Since then, though, things have been moving up. Part of the issue we had here as to why it moved up quicker than it did in other areas is we are a smaller demographic. We had a lot of construction going on because loans were fairly cheap, interest rates. So you had people who were in the residential construction business, they were not doing well at all. So you had this surplus of workers that then the commercial contractors could then pick up, and they had cheap labor. So we've seen commercial building projects drop by 20 to 30% in cost. And so to take advantage of the cheaper money that was available, we had a lot of building going on up in the Lehigh area that turned out just to be empty offices, but it was so cheap to build, they were gambling on the fact that this was going to turn around quickly. And so because we had a lot of infrastructure that was built during that period of time, when it did start turning around and you had Microsoft and others coming in, Adobe started building all of that, then we started seeing this coming back up fairly quickly. But the interesting part is we're pretty much parallel to the growth, where before you can see nationally it was actually going up quicker than what it was going up here in Utah County. Now our growth factors are going up about the same rate as the national. And we're right here. That value today is pretty much at the peak of the market before it burst. So we've actually come back up. The thing that's concerning, though, is you don't see wages and other things coming up at that same rate. So we're getting into a dynamic here where real estate values have gone back up, but the ability to qualify for loans is now restricted more. You don't see the income rising as fast, so you're not qualifying as easily for this range that you would need to get into a home. The other dynamic that I just want to make you aware of is right here. A lot of people who back in this period were getting the help to get out of their upside down loans. They weren't actually getting out of them. They just helped them refinance because a lot of them had these interest only loans, and when they went from interest only to the next level, which is, now you got to start paying at a higher rate, they just couldn't afford it. The reason they were in the interest only to begin with is they couldn't afford to get in the home anyways. And they didn't see a downside to it because a lot of times the loans required no money down. So you had nothing invested you had no equity. So if you got nothing in the game, then it's easy to walk away from it. That's really what caused a lot of this to start plummeting. Most of the homes that were foreclosed on quickly down in the Las Vegas area were secondary homes. People are pulling equity out of their house somewhere else, buying a second home in Vegas, and as soon as the market plunges, you get rid of the second home first and stay where you're at. Well, if you don't have a lot of equity in the house, you don't really care that much. But they did lose equity in their second loan on their original house that got them into the second house in Vegas. So all of this dove down. But now, right now, there's a trend right now that these people who got bailed out, it's been about 3 years, now those loans are having modifications and changing. And so right now, nationally, there is a trend for more and more foreclosures again. So exactly how this dynamic is going to work, I really can't tell you, because truthfully, I thought we were only going to get to here and then kind of come back down. And it actually peaked up here. So how high this is going to go within that dynamic, I'm really not sure at this point. We're just watching it and being very conservative on our values to see what will happen. What happened is they had to blame somebody. You know, there's a problem, you know, so somebody's got to be blamed. There were a lot of people blamed. One of them was the appraisers. They said, well, how can you guys be valuing this stuff way up here when it's really not? It should have been down here somewhere. The dynamics of that market was so crazy. The appraisers, by the time they got done with the appraisal and by the time it got closed and everything, you're seeing another 1% to 2% increase in the value between when you locked in and when you finally closed. So everybody was looking at it as easy money, you know, just inflation going up. You've seen a lot of that in California back in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s, when, you know, just get into it because you're going to make money. So what happened is the federal government at this point, they passed some laws. One of them was to create what's called appraisal management companies. They said the appraiser was getting too close to the loan officer. So they created this party in the middle called an appraisal management company. So the appraiser now works through the appraisal management company thinking that the loan officer can never select or even know who's doing the appraisal. That was the concept. Once you put it into practice, though, there weren't a lot of restrictions on the appraisal management companies. And so now the appraisal management companies were actually hiring their own appraisers in some cases, which was not the concept. They're supposed to be independent, just like the appraisers are independent. So I think they're taking another look at that to see if it's really working, because it's not keeping the cost of the loans down at all, because now you've got all these middle tiers making money off of the process that were not involved before. So now closing costs are even more, or the appraiser is not making as much money because they have to take a lower, do their work for less. They're actually asked to produce more and more documentation. And so the appraisal industry itself, you've seen a lot of people leave because they just couldn't make money. Now, because of this, and we're in a hotter market now with fewer appraisers, and there's a lot of appraisers doing pretty well, and even though at the lower rate, they're actually getting a higher volume. So it's kind of an offset, but it does take them quite a while to get that done. Does that answer your question on that middle tier and how that happened? I know short meetings are the best meetings, so I appreciate you guys. County assessor is required by statute to value every property in this county, Utah County or whatever county you're in, value every property every year. And then we're supposed to be within 10% of the market. How we do that is we break down every area in the county, and we have approximately 20 different valuation areas that we do. But within each valuation area, we have submarkets. So we don't want a single family rambler compared to a split level home or a 2-story and all that. So, and we also have different ages in which properties were built. What we do have is we have an amazing database with all the property characteristics of every property in Utah County. So what we do is we match up properties that have sold with the property characteristics of all the other properties around it. And based on the similarity between them, we come up with a new value for every property every year. We have a full-time statistician, and that's all he does is he creates these valuation models comparing square footage, type of construction, quality of construction, where it's located, all of this into a model, and because of this model, we're able to revalue all the properties every year in the county. It's kind of daunting when you think about 170,000 appraisals that you have to do every year with just our staff's not that big. I mean, someone working for a bank may do 1 or 2 a day. And if you equate that to what we do, I would have to hire everybody in Mapleton to work for me, you know. So instead of doing that, we actually have computers. What we do today was not even possible probably 15 years ago, 20 years ago, probably 20. The speeds of computers, the sophistication of software. We use what's called multiple regression, which allows us to identify what variables people are paying for, square footage, quality construction, those types of things. And then based on that, we can identify how well the model works based on a regression analysis. And we're usually within, 10% high or low in the end. We have some models that are as low as 3%, but those are areas where everything's basically the same type of construction.
And how many parcels are there in the county that you have to?
We value about 170,000 parcels every year. Yeah, the legislature says we want a value of the property as of January 1st of every year. So what we do is we go back in time and we look at all the sales that occurred prior to that January 1.
And what's the window that you look at in time?
We put weights on it. So if it's less than a year back, then it's weighted more than, because we'll go back as far as 3 years to get enough sales. And then we'll time trend all those sales. But we put more weight on the more recent sales than we do the older sales. A lot of that has to do with land value too. I mean, a lot value in that area of Orem is going to be quite a bit more than a lot value somewhere else. So there is, we lived in Orem almost 20 years ago. We decided to sell the house there. We actually started moving south because I was on the road all the time. I was never home. My wife was looking for a smaller community. And it was interesting even then, and you'll see the same trend today. The further you come south, the more you can get for your money. But you also have a commute. And so,
even including Lehigh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Everything.
So we've seen that when values started going up too. The values originally started going up in Highland. Highland was the epicenter of the valuation. People were coming in and buying vacant lots. They tied up all the vacant lots, and they artificially forced the value up based on supply and demand. There was no more supply because they were able to gather up all the vacant land. Well, as that started pushing up, then you've seen values in Lehigh, American Fork, all those areas started going up. And then next was Saratoga, Orem, the Provo area. Provo was kind of stable through the whole thing, but we actually tracked it until you got all the way out to Santaquin and Eagle Mountain. And when those prices started coming up because of the pressures of each one, as values go up, people couldn't afford there, so they go out a little further until they could find what they could afford. When the bubble burst, it was just that ripple effect coming back through. So you've seen Santaquin drop, and you've seen Eagle Mountain drop, and it came up the line to Spanish Fork, and things just kept dropping all the way back up into the Highland area. So, yeah.
So you have an evaluation, and that's what we pay our property taxes based on.
That's what it's based on, is our valuation, yes.
And what's the percentage that you pay on your primary?
You get a residential exemption. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah. If you're commercial or vacant land, you have to pay on the actual value. But if it's your primary residence or someone else's primary residence, then you only pay on 55% of the value. And that's called the residential exemption. We had another question.
Did you know
here.
Tony Peck?
I did know Tony.
He was a member of club for a while.
Yeah, Tony retired just shortly before I arrived. I think he retired in 1999 or 2000, right in there.
What's, if you don't have the 55% exemption, what is it?
It's actually 100%. So whatever the market value is, you multiply that by the tax rate, and that is what you pay on. Tax rate is anywhere between 1.1% and 1.5%.
That's a nice devaluation.
Yeah, I mean, right
55.
there, you're taking half away,
Yeah.
and so it is a nice benefit.
You live in Mapleton now,
No, I'm down in Payson.
Payson? And where did you say you played on Kiwanis Field, baseball? And
Oh, I grew up in Richfield,
Richmond? Oh,
Yeah.
good.
so
They have Kiwanis down there. Huh?
we're on TV, so you better hope they're not watching right now. Yeah, they had Kiwanis and Rotary, and yeah, we had the Bureau of the Elks Lodge overlooked the Lions Field, and yeah, we had quite a bit going on there. It was a very small town. I mentioned Lehigh was a 2A school because Richfield was a 2A school at that time, so we used to come up and play against them. We used to come up to the big city and play against them. Yeah.
Where's your wife's primary residence? Well,
She grew up in a little place called Marysville. I give her a bad time out because they're always so proud about the Big Rock Canyon Mountain next to Marysville, but it's not in Piute County, it's in Sevier County. So their biggest landmark isn't even in their area. It's actually owned by somebody else.
That's right.
Well, thank you.
Oh,
Thanks,
quick
Doug.
question.
Yes.
So, you running for re-election in 2 years?
I actually am just starting my next term, so
Oh.
I've got a few years there. Yeah.
Wow.
So-
Goes too fast.
It does, doesn't it? I can't believe I've been here 12 years. Rafe was giving me a bad time about
I've
that.
known him for 17 and a half.
I was working for the county in 97, 98, and 99. I got an offer to go do commercial appraisal down in Albuquerque. So I left, spent a little bit of time down there. The company offered to send me to Ohio and get into software development. And so I went to Ohio, spent 2.5 years there. They merged with a company called Tyler. Tyler bought them out. They had a software development company in Texas. So I was transferred to Dallas, Texas. Still living in Payson. So I would fly out. I'd fly out on Monday, fly home on Friday. That's why my wife wanted something smaller than Orem. Payson's not so small anymore.
is your wife
But-
happy to see you when she only sees you once a week?
For the first 2 weeks, yeah. Then it's just back to normal. But I was actually down in Texas when I ran my first campaign. So I would come up on the weekends, run my campaign, and then during the week I was in Texas in a motel room running my campaign. So how I won, I still don't know. If you think about it statistically, all the odds were against me, but I got 43% of the vote, just enough in the convention to push it to a primary. And then at the primary, I got 59%. And we didn't have a Democrat run against in that race. So I spent 6 months down in Texas. I told them I was leaving. I gave my 6-month notice. They were okay with it. I finished up my work there. They sent me back to Ohio to wrap up some things, some projects they had back there, and then I quit my job it was a Friday. I worked Friday and flew back to Utah, and on the following Tuesday I was sworn into office. So no vacation.
Brian Thompson is my neighbor. You know him?
Yeah, I know Brian. Brian's the clerk auditor.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
How do you interact with them?
We have a very close relationship because after I get done with all the values, I actually pass them on to Brian as the auditor, and Brian handles all the Board of Equalization. So if you want to protest the value, it's actually Brian's department that handles all of that. We send out the valuation notices in the end of July, and then the protest period is August and halfway through September. And then the 1st of October, the values are then transferred to the treasurer so he can get the final tax notices sent out.
So if you disagree with your value that you're being assessed, at this time you could schedule a meeting, correct?
Yeah, on the valuation notice, it'll give a phone number and how to contact.
What type of
If you,
information do you have to bring to those?
well, some of the people just show up in my office and we'll sit down and talk about it because sometimes there isn't available a lot of data. So we'll actually sit down and see if, sometimes we make a mistake. We found times when we've got the square footage of the house that's not right. Maybe you have a half basement and we have you as a full basement, things like that. So we'll sit down and sometimes, we just didn't get it right. So we will sit down with people and look at it and make sure everything's looks valid.
Said he has an open door.
I'm not asking for a lot of detail, but I know that a lot of our property tax goes to education.
Yes.
Is that right?
In Nebo, a lot of it goes to education, yeah.
Higher in Nebo than other places? No.
It's higher than Provo. Provo has their own school district. It's pretty close to Alpine. I think it's a couple of percentages less than Alpine. Alpine one year had correct me if I'm wrong, it was at a 30% increase in the tax rate. So it was 60%, and they had a 30% increase. Part of that the board did, part of it was voted on by the people through a levy. And so they increased the levy, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So 30 into 60 it was about an 18% increase in your overall tax because of that.
What is the percentage that the county runs to administer all that?
We have something called the assessing and collecting levy. And they put that in place because most of the money that is collected for property tax goes to education. I think the average in Utah County is 65.
I don't know. I know it's high.
I know the average is over 60 in the state. So we're not really that. But I think in Nebo, I'm thinking we're closer to 70, aren't we? That 70% that goes? Yeah. Another percent, about 15% to 20% will go to the city. And then you've got another 10 to 12% that goes to the county. But besides that, they have this assessing and collecting rate. And I want to say it's right around 2%. And that's what funds the treasurer, the assessor's office, part of the auditor's office, and the recorder's office is this 2%. And yeah, that's where we get funded because the county doesn't receive most of the money. Almost 90% of it, 85% of it is actually sent back out to other entities, school districts, cities, special service districts, those types. So.
I serve on the county health department.
Okay.
What's your relationship with them?
Absolutely nothing.
They have
I do
a
know.
budget, I see.
Yeah. I know Bird and a few of those guys over there, and I'm trying to think of Dr. Miner's first name. Joe Miner. So we do have interactions with the health department, but really they're a division that I really don't interact that much with. They actually have their own, the Health and Justice Building is where they're located.
Right.
Yeah.
But you assess and then the treasurer's office collects, or do you collect?
No, the treasurer's office collects.
Treasurer's office collects and then disperses it to wherever.
Right.
County commission. Do you work under the county commission then?
Well, I'm independently elected, but the county commissioners do control my budget. So it's another one of those Kiwanis, Rotary Club type environments where you're kind of confused is, am I really independent or am I not, But I do laugh about that, but I keep telling them that we have an assessing collecting levy, and that's 100% of my funding. So if the sheriff's department doesn't have extra people out in the field, doing whatever the sheriff's department does, they shouldn't be looking at my fund to make sure that they have enough money to do that, because we are legislatively supposed to be independent of all the other departments. Doesn't always work that way, but yeah, that's the way it was
They can talk to the
designed.
County commission if they want more money for policing.
That's right, they should.
It's
But-
it's a very viable portion that we need that 2% to function correctly.
And the concept is like I said, most of the money is exported out to other taxing entities. And so they wanted to make sure that because of that, it was funded and funded properly, to make sure that we keep the integrity of the taxation system in place. So I didn't mean to trash the sheriff's department. They're a bunch of great guys.
You weren't trash.
Thanks.
very much.
Thanks, Doug.
Chris, on behalf of our Spanish Fork Kiwanis Club, thank you so much for taking the time to come visit with us tonight. Thanks again to Channel 17 and all they do. We have a certificate for you.
Well, thank you.
It tells of our appreciation for you coming. And let's give Chris a round of applause. Thank you so much.